Hello and welcome to my latest talk on Roman roads. This time I will be covering a number of different roads in the south of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, both familiar roads and new ones. This is Ivan Margary's map of the area, and as you can see it's got a lot of gaps in it. Let's try to make that a little more complete. Before we arrive in Hampshire, I'd like to start in West Sussex, for reasons that will become apparent later on. If you have been watching some of my previous videos, you'll know that a prevailing theme you see across all of them is that where you get a Roman road crossing a river, you get a Roman settlement, with most major settlements being on a significant watercourse. I say most as there are a few exceptions. The Roman town of Noviomagus Reginorum, today known as Chichester, is not on a river. The river Lavant doesn't count, as that was a much later diversion of the river to run past the city. To the north, the Roman town of Calewa Attribatum, now known as Silchester, is the same. What both have in common is a series of Iron Age bank and ditch systems surrounding them. For Chichester, these are known as the Chichester entrenchments and are shown as green lines on the map north of the Roman town. For Silchester, the system of banks and ditches is known to be part of a territorial oppidum, an Iron Age system where a large area of land is surrounded by defences, and Silchester sits on the edge of that. I'm suggesting that the reason both towns are where they are, instead of on a river crossing, is because the Romans sited the towns on existing major Iron Age settlements. It's this connection between Roman roads and Iron Age sites in this particular area that is relevant to the rest of this talk. Now we head west of Chichester along the Roman road towards Havant, where a small Roman settlement is centred around a spring known as Homewell Spring. There are a few Roman villas surrounding the settlement too. To the north of Havant is another important site from the Roman period, a series of pottery kilns near Rowland's Castle, which gives its name to a type of pottery common in the southeast. You would expect there to be a Roman road leading from Havant to such an important site, and while there are some straight sections of road and field boundary heading in that direction, none of it is particularly convincing, so that will have to remain a mystery for now. Further to the west, the course of the road is covered by a paper by Johnson and Reed, which you can find online. They describe a number of excavations along the course of the stone and gravel road. Also in the area is another important Roman site, the coastal fort at Portchester. It's not known exactly where the road to this is, despite some suggestions. One possibility is a series of modern roads and field boundaries shown in light blue, but there is as much proof of that as the road heading towards Rowland's Castle, i.e. none. Heading further west again, the main Roman road crosses the River Meon, where we again get the expected Roman settlement on a river crossing. Like most river crossing settlements, there is archaeology to be found on both sides of the river at Wickham. To the east of the river, marked in orange, there have been recent excavations by Cotswold Archaeology, where a roadside ladder settlement has been excavated and includes a lot of wells, despite being close to the river. To the west, in more limited excavations, signs of habitation were found when a pipeline was built. There is a road to the northwest, Margary's Road number 420, leading to Winchester, but we are not going to be following that today. We are going to continue to the west along Margary's Road number 421. To the west of Wickham, it's not far to go before we hit another river crossing and another settlement. This time it's a settlement at Curbridge on the River Hamble, where a number of Roman buildings have been found. After that, the road becomes a bit more difficult to trace, as some Burke went and built Southampton on top of it. Fortunately, some of this part of the road is covered in Rescue Archaeology in Hampshire, Volume 2. The road is heading for another settlement at another river crossing. The river is the Itchen, and the settlement, now known as part of Hampshire called Bittern, was known as Clausentum in Roman times, which means stopping or ending. Ivan Margary did think that the road stopped here, or at least did a 90-degree turn further to the north, but that doesn't make much sense, as there are places to go to the west. The lack of known road to the west is of course due to that pesky Southampton again. Actually, there may be a slight trace of the road in Southampton Common, but it's very faint and I'm not completely convinced, so let's move swiftly on to the west. Another river crossing, this time of the River Test, and another settlement at modern-day Nursling, where a number of Roman period ditches, pits and enclosures were excavated in the 1990s. The expecting but missing Roman road is here joined by another Roman road from the northeast, Margary Road 422, leading to Winchester again, almost as a mirror image of what we saw at Wickham earlier. Right after we have crossed the River Test, there is yet another branch road, Margary's Road 423, which was explored further in a paper by Clark. This road heads to the coast at Leap, where another settlement was found during a pipeline excavation, revealing pits, post holes, ditches and buildings, and dating evidence from throughout the Roman period. Given the position of the settlement and the direction the road is heading, you may be expecting a port somewhere nearby, with a ferry crossing to get to the Isle of Wight, known as Insula Vectis in the Roman period. But the Romans tended to prefer ports on rivers, which were much more sheltered. You don't get many coastal ports. And yet, that may be what happened. On the island across the Solent, I found what may be a Roman road leading from near Cowes to the southwest. Why there wasn't just a longer riverine route from Nursling to Newport is not clear. Incidentally, there is a recent book on the Roman period in the Isle, titled Roman Vectis by David Tomalin. It's an excellent book which I thoroughly recommend buying. The book doesn't mention this possible road, which looks as you would expect a Roman road to look, with alternating sections of agger and cut where the road has been eroded or robbed. David's book does mention one particularly interesting feature, a possible Roman military camp underneath what is now Carisbrooke Castle. There is also a concentration of villas in Boken Valley underneath the camp, which David suggests may have been some form of vicus. The possible road passes all of that by, however, and instead seems to be heading to the southwest in the direction of Rock Roman Villa. Back to the mainland, and back to just west of Nursling, where the road to Leap starts, or at least crosses the main east-west road. Near to this junction is another Iron Age site, a hill fort named Tatchbury Mount, which the road to Leap makes a great effort to pass very close to. What about the track shown in purple though? Ivan Margary didn't mention that. It seems to continue on from the Leap Road, but is actually a bit different. At no point does this section of track show as an agger. With Roman roads you usually get a mixture of agger and cut, but this is just cut. Instead, it's something called a braided track. These are very common in Britain and are formed as one track gets worn out or boggy and a new track starts next to it, often several times, leaving a twisted or braided set of tracks all heading in the same direction. This example of a braided track is a little different to others, however. For a start, it seems to continue from a Roman road. Sometimes braided tracks form on the line of a worn-out Roman road, but usually you get at least some sections of agger. Not here though. It's also a lot longer and straighter than other examples. So, is it the remains of a Roman road? It's difficult to say. Further along this track you can see a better preserved example of the braiding. Nearby are place names which suggest a reason why this track has been preserved so well here. names such as Cadnam Bog, Wixmore Farm and Sturtmoor Pond. Obviously not the best place for the sort of cultivation that would have destroyed the remains of the track. Here's the full extent of the track that is visible on the LiDAR. At the western end it climbs onto hills that are much better for cultivation, and the track disappears. What would it have been heading for though? We'll get back to that in a bit. Back to Tatchbury Mount west of Nursling again, to follow the main road further west. There are some well preserved sections of Agger visible here, and some of them behave very strangely. Is the road avoiding areas of boggy ground? I've seen roads go through worse. While the road is quite bendy in places, it's nothing compared to the sharp turn after it has reached Mailwood Castle. This is a hill fort, undated unfortunately, sitting on the end of a ridge. The road acts like it is making a special effort to pass close to the fort before turning to the west to head to the next destination. To the west there is a branch road to the north. Or is it simply a turn? More on that later. Ivan Margry knew about a short section of this. The section shown in yellow was first described in the Proceedings of the Prehistoric Society, which seems odd for a Roman road. The article in question was actually on the subject of Bronze Age barrows in the area. Both the barrows and the Roman road have been destroyed in the construction of a now disused airfield. Further north, near Fritham, is roughly where Ivan Margry's knowledge of the road ends, but it does make a turn to the west, where it is visible on the LiDAR as variously a road agger, a cut, and as a braided track. The insert shows a particularly well preserved section which still shows the roadside quarry pits. Near that is another possible branch, turning to the south and leading towards another site that was important in the Roman period, the New Forest potteries. The black dot marks roughly the centre of a widely dispersed group of pottery kilns that produced pottery known today as New Forest ware, an important pottery type in the area. Further to the west, things are not quite as clear as that well-preserved section, so here is my best guess at the route. It passes by modern God's Hill and also very close to, surprise surprise, another Iron Age hill fort named Frankenbury, before dropping into the valley of the River Avon. Across the river, the agger of the road appears under some medieval ridge and furrow, and just out of the deepest part of the valley, since this is a river crossing, we of course have a Roman settlement at Burgate, just to the north of Fordingbridge. On aerial photographs you can see the Roman road marked R, with an adjacent enclosure marked E. You can ignore the prehistoric barrows marked B, but the trackway T leading north from the Roman road is of interest, as well as the building at A. This type of building, with 2 rows of posts and a series of rooms at one end, is of a well-known type known as an aisled barn. These commonly appear alongside Roman villas, but no villa is visible here. Sometimes you get barns at settlements at river crossings, where produce from the surrounding area is stored before it leaves by boat. Ignoring an actual Roman villa further to the southwest at Rockbourne, the road, rather unclearly, seems to head to, you guessed it, another Iron Age hill fort named Whitsbury, where it seems to stop. It's certainly an impressive hill fort, but why would the Romans be interested in building a road to a hill fort as a destination? The answer may lie with further earthworks of such a scale that we really need to zoom out to take it all in. Known as Grimm's Ditch, these earthworks are a substantial bank and ditch of a form similar to that seen at Silchester and Chichester, and enclose an area of lowland with Whitsbury Hill Fort at the edge. So is this too an Iron Age territorial oppidum, just not converted to a Roman town? The waters are muddied somewhat by the earthworks themselves, which were not all built at the same time. This can be seen if you look at Roman Road 4C to the northwest, which interacts with the earthworks. At one section, marked A, the earthworks seem to act as though the Roman road were there first, but at section marked B, the Roman road makes a turning as it crosses the earthworks, as if the earthworks were there first. The whole circuit is truly massive, so it seems obvious to say that the sections were built at different times, but the question is how different, and do they represent a territorial oppidum? Incidentally, it is this that the long section of braided track from Tatchbury is heading for. Back to the main east-west road. There is the question of whether or not it does continue west. The candidate course is the modern A31. On the plus side, it's very straight in sections, as you would expect for a Roman road, and it's heading for the fort at Wimborne. On the minus side, there is currently no proof it is Roman, and there is no known settlement at Ringwood. On balance, I would just about take the side that it is Roman, but don't quote me on that. Here's the entire area we have been looking at. Apart from continuing the prevailing theme across all of my videos of Roman period settlement at river crossings, this video has introduced a new theme, special to this area, an area known as the hillfort zone of Roman roads strongly interacting with Iron Age sites. This is both reflected by Roman towns built on Iron Age sites such as Silchester, Winchester and possibly Chichester, and also roads heading to a number of hill forts. As well as the hill forts mentioned in this video, major examples further to the west include Roman Road 4C connecting Badbury Rings near Shatwick and Old Sarum via the possible territorial oppidum extending from Whitsbury Castle. The differences in behaviour of the Roman roads in this area, and how that contrasts with other regional themes, is something I'll be discussing in another video. For now, thank you for listening.